we talk about wealth today. We talk about non-conventional income streams, which is kind of a weird title, I guess. But the idea is to discuss how to generate wealth in the different ways, different options that are available. Of course, we're not going to touch upon all of the options. It's just an introductory discussion. It's something that I think both me and you have a say in, right? We have had our experience in the past, and let's see where it goes. Of course, we have a few ideas in mind, but I'm sure from this can spin off like a lot of different directions, a lot of other episodes potentially, if there's interest. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is one of the major, I would say, arguments about working with working in general, which is the difference between being employed and being self-employed. And because lately there's been COVID has been one of the aspects, I guess, that accelerated the reasoning behind why do I have to go to an office. Many of the jobs that are available, not all, but many, can be done remotely or partially remotely. So there's this hybrid movement, smart working. We all know about this.
Yeah,
but yeah, but
COVID accelerated all of it, right?
It did, right? But in a way, I guess it brings up a lot of reflection upon like what's the ideal way of living, right? Like what's the balance between work and the rest, the famous work-life balance, right? And so I guess in a way I came to a conclusion on my end that is, of course, anyone has their own personal ideal scenario of where work should be, how it should be actually. But also I think more than that, there is this aspect of what you really like to do and how you really like to do it, right? So, and I think I want to talk about it because many times it's this, I think, misconception of there's a path. We talked about this in another discussion we had, right? Like this classic path that in the Western world many have.
That was the discussion from the lady that lived on the street where we got into an argument.
Right. And I think this kind of like gets into that because the point is, why do you work? I don't want to get into like the philosophical aspect too much, but it's like, why do you work? How work is part of your life and day to day. And for many of us, it is, right?
I think maybe it makes sense to even define what we mean by work, because I think I would say there's two main reasons to work, quote unquote, right? There's income and there's fulfillment, right?
Right.
And sometimes they're not aligned. Oftentimes they're not aligned. But I don't know, is there a third reason to work? Like, what does work mean? And like, what are reasons aside from income and fulfillment to work, quote unquote?
I mean, fulfillment is such a big bucket.
I get it, yeah.
But
but for example, is Picasso, when he paints, is he working? Is that work?
That's so you're talking about, it's a good point. Like you're talking about when work and passion collide and becomes like a unique thing. That's amazing, right? Because work doesn't feel like work, but it feels like you're doing something you like to do. And that's
I do think, sorry to interrupt, it's just that I had this discussion recently with someone that she's so I dance, right? And she used to be a professional dancer, and she said making it her job made her lose her passion for dancing. And I think that's something to keep in mind also, right? Like making it your more than just your passion, like maybe for income or whatever else, might make it less pleasant to you.
But why is that? I think that one of the reasons, it would be nice to ask her, but like one of the reasons is because when it becomes work, you feel like it becomes something you have to do. It's a must.
Exactly.
Right? It's not anymore. So you kind of like lose of some sort of freedom on how to do it, when to do it.
Exactly.
But it doesn't have to be, right? And that I think goes back to the distinction between like, should I be an employee? Should I be self-employed? And people think like, I guess this idea of if you're an employee, you have strict rules. It depends. It's not like that always. It depends on the company you work for. But you tend to have strict rules and like specifically on when you have to start working every day, when you have to stop, how much you have to work, the output. And so like holidays are kind of like organized schedule. You have a set amount of days of holidays. And on the other end, location sometimes, right? If you don't work remotely or you work hybrid, you still have to go to the office sometime every week, and that limits your freedom. But for some people, it's actually good. They want this because I think it really. So it's hard to give an answer to this. I think employee versus self-employed. Many people would actually prefer to be an employee. I've met so many so far that they want to be an employee because it just takes off the mental um, effort of thinking about a lot of things,
Yeah.
and also gives this sense of security, which I'm not super sure is actually real. There's more of a perception of security because if you work for a company, they can still fire you, or the company can go bankrupt, right? And you still have to go for and find another job. So it kind of gives that because somebody else is taking care of giving you the sense of security. Is you're not on your own, right? Especially if
Mhm.
you're self-employed, but really like by yourself. There's this feeling of you have to take care of everything, and that's more mental bandwidth, more effort. And some people just want to distinguish work from the rest of their life.
So yeah, I think there are definitely certain things that are easier when you're employed, right? So I have to say I've never been in a true employed position. So I think like all my jobs were fairly non-standard. So I have been employed, and I think you have been employed, right?
Yes,
But you also haven't had real like corporate jobs like me, right?
I did actually.
Oh, you did. Okay. What did you do?
I was working for an airline for 6 months, 9 months, like a huge airline. And so I was like in this
Oh,
building.
airline. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Airline, yes. They
Yeah.
were like thousands of people, like in a
Okay.
common, shared space. Those like offices that have like
Oh,
one huge
the
room, things like
Yeah,
that.
so yeah, I
Yeah.
get it. So yeah, I've never had that. I think like the most employed I've ever been was my last job, probably, and it was a startup. So it's also not. And my position was more like a leading position because my startup got bought by this other startup and so on.
Mhm.
But so I've never actually had the true um like employed feeling. But there are like I think the 2 times or 3 times where I was so technically I was employed 3 times, I think. um, and there are definitely certain things that are nicer, right? So like for example, usually there's less bureaucracy, right? You don't have to deal with regulation, and you don't have to do as much paperwork.
Yeah,
There's usually someone else to do the paperwork for you, which is I think super nice because I hate paperwork, I hate bureaucracy, I hate regulation and all that stuff. And it's something you have to do, right? Like you have to file the taxes for the company, you have to register the company, all this like overhead that comes with running your own business, and which is not directly related to what you like to do, right? If you let's say you have a carpenter's business, and what you really like to do is carpenting, but then you have to like set up the company, do like sales, do marketing, do so there's all this overhead that people don't
true.
want to do.
Although
They
although
just
you
want to do the
can
thing that yeah.
you can do it with other people.
Yeah.
And they take care of that, right? Like because I think there's this sort of step. There are multiple steps on different steps. Let's say being self-employed. You can be by yourself. You can be like a freelancer or a
Yeah, of
solopreneur,
course.
or you
Well, we'll
can.
talk about that. I
Yeah,
think I think the thing is that certain things, and then I think there's the responsibility that comes with being the employer of other people or of yourself, right? You, I think, if you own a company, there's some additional psychological pressure. Be
for
so, for
sure.
example, like so, you remember my friend and I. I mean, we actually had some businesses together, which people might not know. But like when you have a business and clients are dependent on you, like there's you're never really off, right? So like let's say you're out with your friends and then something bad happens to your company. Like for example, I had a software company, and then I remember one time we went out with some friends, and then something broke, right? Our server, something was wrong with the server. Like there was a bug that like really made a lot of trouble for our users, and like a lot of money was on the line, so we had to like scramble to get it fixed where we
For
were.
sure.
Like it was important to fix it right now, and if it's not your company, that responsibility is not yours, right? You have your job, you're done at 5 or whenever, And then if something terrible happens to the company, you can still enjoy your drinks with your friends. You don't have to scramble back to the office,
Well, I would
unless
argue.
it's like a study.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
argue
sure. There are
depends.
yeah,
It
yeah,
depends
yeah. It depends on the company
if
for sure.
it's your fault, in a way,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, also there. I mean, more likely in a startup that you have to
For
do it, and
sure.
some working cultures are more like that. Like I remember my friend who's employed now, but he's like us a little bit. Like he did a lot of freelancing and so on, but like he works for a smaller company, and he broke their server, and it was like down for an hour or so, and like I think it was very stressful. Like he had to like stop doing whatever he was doing just to go fix it, and that's super high stress, right? And
Right. And in a way, you can say, if you make mistakes in your own company, this is actually one of the reasons why I decided to go by myself,
mhm,
because I don't like the idea of having to um, depend on others in any shape or form.
yeah,
So I was like, if I make a mistake in a company I work for, then I'm depending, my livelihoods depends from like on the job I do, right? So
yeah.
if I make a mistake, they might fire me. And if I make a mistake by my own, it's on me. Of course, I make my own success and failure.
You can still bankrupt your company by
Yeah, of
your with your
course,
own
but
mistakes, right?
there's more room for mistakes. You could argue it's arguable, but
Yeah, as you
potentially
could
there's
argue.
more room. Yeah.
I think there's the additional thing, if you do employ others, like I think in your company you are employing other people,
Mhm.
you have their well-being
For sure.
on your mind as well, right? Because like I mean, unless you're an
This
evil
actually
person.
becomes one of the most like, I think once you start um, having a team and working with
Mhm,
a team, the two things you worry the most and you focus the most every single day, I think it becomes natural, is motivation of your team. Because if the
mhm.
team is motivated and they do what they like, they want what they do,
Yeah.
these things are aligned, you just work, everyone works better. So
Mhm,
you want that, you want motivation to be super high. And you also, on the other hand, want to make sure, because that's part of it by itself, make sure that they are taken care of.
mhm.
Because if
Yeah.
they feel that, if you are doing that and they feel that, motivation goes higher. And ultimately you play a long-term game, which is actually, there's an interesting concept there, right? There are a few concepts I'd like to touch on today, because I think they kind of like change your perspective on work. And one
Mhm.
is this, like playing long-term game. There are some people that talk about infinite games, right? The difference between playing finite games uh, and infinite games. And the difference is, what they call infinite games in a way is a long-term game where you ideally don't want to stop, and you play with other people. And these kind of games are potentially, they're win-win by definition, right? Because otherwise one would want to stop playing this game. And by game I mean a collaboration, in this case with work, right? But this could apply to any aspect of life, when you have to interact with other people. So like relationships are an infinite games if played well, correctly, right? So
Uh-huh.
the idea is,
What are finite games?
like, competition tends to be a finite game, because you're actually competing against somebody and one ends up winning,
Okay, okay,
right?
okay. Yeah,
Collaboration is an infinite game. So this is the
I see.
major
I see.
distinction.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, get it.
So it's pretty interesting, because if you approach everything you do that way, you see, by doing this for a while, you figure out that playing long-term games or infinite games ultimately, it's just beneficial for everybody. And
Yeah.
not only you and the other person, but potentially the environment, the landscape you're in, like other players, other partners, other people that you're not even, stakeholders that you're not even considering. So being an employee, unfortunately, my view, I'm disclaimer, this is my view, right?
Mhm.
My personal view, I believe, doesn't really make you play an infinite game or a long term game.
I get it, because you're just like in this contract with the company, and it's just you just like want it's just like a transactional thing, right? You want your money for you're selling your time for your money, but it's like you don't have the company's success at heart or something, right? Is that what
Correct.
you're saying? Yeah.
Yes.
I get it. I think the only thing I wanted to say before is that I do understand people's desire for employment, is in the same way that I do understand people's desire for self-employment. I think both have benefits, and I think I've experienced both to some extent. And there are certain stress factors that come with being your own boss, or in a startup and so on, because it can be very stressful. And I know from you also, right? I
Oh,
see
of
you,
course, of
but
course.
an employment can also be stressful. Like, if you think of, I don't know, bankers and McKinsey and all the stuff, and don't get me
Right.
started, but I think that's super unhealthy. I think you can technically be stressed as an employee and as a self-employed person, and the other way around. I think there are people that always think the other is better because they haven't experienced it, and there's
Right.
a lot of myths about either side, right? If you
Right.
don't know. So I think there's a lot of benefits. I definitely am a person that when I've done my startups, I was happy to be done with them because there was a lot of stress. But then when I'm sometimes, my last job, I was employed, and I realized that I just don't get along with a lot of manager type people,
Hmm.
just because, like, I feel like I know better, and I want to do things my way and so on,
Hmm.
which is something you get when you're your own boss. But yeah, I think there's obviously the grass is always greener, but benefits to both. But also, and I think you want to talk about this after, there's a lot of myths about both, right?
Oh, of course, of course. So yeah, the main, I guess, this wanted to be an introduction, so we could talk about it for way longer. I think
For
employee
sure, for
versus
sure.
self-employed, but I think yes, the main difference is, when you're employed, you generally have limitation on your freedom, but you also, that's the downside, I guess. But the upside is you have more peace of mind. If we have
Yeah,
to
and
simplify, I guess, right?
yeah, and then one thing that I kind of touched upon earlier is that depending on what you mean by work, you can technically separate the reasons for work into different things, right? For
Hmm.
example, let's say uh, you have a lot of income from the stock market, and you actually, like, you don't have to work technically to for income, but you're employed anyway just because you like the thing, right? Let's say you really like the people you work with, and you really like doing the thing you do, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you work as a cleaner, or I don't even know, or maybe you just, I mean, you work as a programmer or whatever it is, or a teacher, because you really like teaching, and
Right.
you do your day job, but actually you don't need to do it. You just do it because you like it, and it gives you community feeling. It gives you, it gives you this feeling of using the skills you have and so on, but actually you don't do it for the work. So I think there's that way also, like, to separate your income stream from your work. And I think this is maybe actually one of the best ways to do it.
It is one approach, which it makes sense, but also that approach, to me, again, in individual thought here, but is actually not in line with your employer needs for you, right? Like, in a way, what does an employer generally, I'm generalizing, but wants to get the most out of its employees?
Hmm. Hmm.
Unfortunately, this sometimes gets exploited, gets in a way of like a normal, healthy work relationship, right?
Yeah.
And on the other end, what does the employee want? Generally wants to do their job and have the benefits of being an employee, so not worrying about, not stressing out about a lot of other aspects, and wants to have certainty of, like, okay, I do this, I get paid at the end of the month, right? So
Yeah.
this is general situation. But the problem with this long-term game perspective is that, many times, this, like, the employer would want, yes, the person to be motivated, but also to work as much as possible. And in a way, so what I will always think every day about, like, how to shift that perspective, how to have the best of both worlds. And I think there is a way. I'm still experimenting on my day-to-day life, like, when I work with people, because there should be a way to align both and, like, get the benefits of both with
Mm.
very little drawbacks. When But not, what I notice is that many people don't actually want to get more of the benefit. They just want, and again, it's everybody's, anyone has their own, like, goals and values and aspirations. Like, no, but no, we don't want the same things. So ultimately, it's that. But I think there's a way there. There's a way to get the best, and it starts from what the individual wants, right? If you figure out what you want, then it's easier to actually get it, because you can, and if there are other people that are, they want to actually communicate and understand your needs, then you many times can actually craft your own work environment and scenario which suits best. And it's really a communication and a try and error and experimentation in a way, because ultimately until now most of the work has been like distinguished between employed and self-employed, but I think there's a hybrid there
Yeah,
potentially.
I think one problem, two comments on this. One is that a problem with this thinking is that I think people don't, or sometimes, or maybe even often, don't know what they want, or they think they want something, but truly they want something else. And I think this is really, it's really topic for a different podcast episode. We talked about this when we talk about like the happiness studies and all this stuff. And I think we should definitely do an episode about that, because like people think, for example, that money makes you happy and so on. I think we touched upon that in the episode where we talked about the article with that woman that lived on the street, and she said you don't need money for financial freedom, right? The fuck you money article. And I think we should do an episode on what truly makes people happy, and it's not money. Money can play a role, but it's usually not the thing that is most important. I think what you want out of your job also is not often not what people think. I think especially people that only look at the salary when they pick a job are misguided, and I think they don't know they're misguided often, because they think they'll be happier with a higher salary, but ignore all the other aspects, like will they be enslaved by their employer, will they work 80-hour weeks, and so on. I think, and then all the other stuff like flexibility on vacation time, like how often can you be remote, like is it can you make your own decisions. And I think these things like are very crucial. Like
Sometimes it's a strategy though. Like there are some people that are like, okay, I'm gonna take 5 years of my life, work a lot, and then just slow down, and the salary is an important part that will make me, because I agree.
Yeah, this is honestly, I think this is so stupid. Like these people, I mean, I don't know, like I think these
I don't
people,
know, it's an approach. You never know about the future for
you're
sure.
young once, I think, and like you slave away for 5
True,
years, and then maybe you
but
get
then
cancer
what
and you're
are
like,
five? True, you never know. But what are 5 years? I'm not 100% sold against it. Like it's what are 5 years in a longer scheme of things, especially if these 5 years can change your life financially. In a way, like everybody has their own standard of what they want, living standard, right? And so that I think plays a huge role into what kind of job and how you do it.
yeah,
But there is this, I don't know. There is this feeling of how can I frame this? The money. We need an episode on money. General, like it should be money. Like the thing with it is that it doesn't give you happiness, but what it does is, in some shape or form, it gives you peace, or it can give you peace. And in another way, it also can give you freedom. But as with everything in life, sometimes you can go the other way around, where it's more of a like a jail, like it actually constrains your freedom, like working too much, being too stressed, right? And it actually constrains your peace of mind. So there's a balance, like in everything. So I think we'll discuss money in general, because it is a fascinating, I think, topic to
yeah,
discuss,
yeah,
because it has so many implications, and we kind of like the society we live in personally, right?
yeah.
It's driven so much by that it's interesting. But just to like give an overview of like the goal today is it was to start with this, and then touch upon a concept that I have in mind, that I've been having in mind for a while, like a few years, which is, what is the way, like if we conceive freedom as, tell me if you agree, but if we conceive freedom as like a very good goal to achieve, like let's say that you want freedom because freedom makes you able to really like live the life, your life the way you want. Would you
Hmm.
agree with me that that's a good goal to have, or maybe not the ultimate goal, but one of the?
Yeah, I think freedom is definitely something to strive for. I mean, I think it's again can get philosophical, and we
Mm.
should do have our own episode on like what's the purpose of life. But, and we can talk for hours about that for sure. I think, yeah, I think and we touched upon that with the article on fuck you money. I
Mhm.
think the freedom to make choices is definitely a huge factor in well-being. aside from like covering your basic needs, which is super important, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that's something to do. But yeah, I think what people really are striving for when they're striving for wealth, I think, is freedom to make choices. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Okay. So then, if you agree that, let's say it's up there, it's one of the main goals
Yeah,
that you might want
yeah, agreed.
to get to. Then there's this concept of planning is important, because we know that uh, you know the way life goes, as you never know about tomorrow, but also, um, as you said before, like you're young once, you have energy, you have like uh, ideas, your mind works faster and better earlier, and then it
Hmm,
tends
hmm.
to like this tends to slow down later. So
Yeah,
planning is very
like
important.
during the day, right?
Yeah, like
The
we like
day,
a
yeah,
day is like a life. I always think like
exactly,
day is like a
exactly.
life, a week is like a life, and the
You're a
same with
little groggy in the morning, you don't know where
right.
you are, then you get
True.
really sharp, and then it really slows down in the
Exactly.
evening. Yeah,
So also that's interesting, because that should guide how you should structure your day if you can, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
making decisions in the morning way better than in the evening.
for
Like
sure, for sure.
book that
Yeah.
flight in the morning, not in the evening. But besides that, I think the main idea is like, how do you plan uh, about wealth, right? And we had a conversation about investing, so I'm not going to touch that area. I think because there are different ways of investing. But what I want to talk about is the difference between work, investing, and building wealth in general. Like what are potential strategies for that, right? And
Hmm,
so this
hmm.
concept of planning then becomes what I've been thinking lately is one of the best way, one approach. There are multiple others, of course, but one approach is you want to have a sort of a machine that generates that helps you generate capital, wealth. So ideally, we talk cash, but it's not really cash. Like we're not talking about having cash in on hand, but it's more about having liquidity, right? Generating capital. I don't have a better word for that. And
Assets, capital. Yeah, I
right,
think because
you start
owning
with
a owning
capital though, right?
yeah, owning a house is also wealth, even though it's
But
not
you
liquid.
get there, right? So you first
Yeah,
generate capital, and then you invest this capital
yeah,
in either real estate, stocks, other companies, arts. There are different things, right?
yeah, yeah.
Collectibles. So thinking about getting this machine, and he could be being employed, right? I'm not saying here, oh, you have to be self-employed or you have to build a company. No, there are multiple ways you can actually achieve capital, like get capital and get cash, and then from there you can invest. And the principle here is this kind of like, we can consider like the waterfall principle, where you get this machine going, which is potentially taking most of your time during the day, because you have to take care of it, right?
Hmm.
You have to spend hours working to actually get this going, being employed or self-employed. And then what happens is that you start using this money, like you actually put this money at work without you having to follow up on that, right? Like, or
Yeah.
little. And I think that's fascinating, because if you
Is that
think
what you mean by the waterfall principle?
right, so like
Isn't that called snowball? No, I don't know. I
maybe
don't know. What is?
snow, I don't know,
I don't know.
people
What is
use
what is the
different terms.
waterfall?
That
Yeah,
the
I don't
idea
know.
is that it's like a waterfall, like you have something that generates, and then there is a sort of like, it gets, the flow is into assets, right, into investing into something else, which in turn generates again capital, or increases in value, right? So ultimately you work for this portion, the initial portion that actually gets put into investment. So you have this, it's really very simple process. You first generate capital, and then you put it at work for you.
Yeah, I think it's probably what the is this famous book. What is it called? Rich Daddy. It sounds weird. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or
Yeah,
something.
I think it's
This
something like
sounds really weird. Um. Anyway, yeah, he says like I think people misunderstand that money also can work like an employee, right? You can make your money work for you, and I think there's this critical point where you have enough spare capital to make it work for you. I think like you're in this. I mean, they always they like these investing gurus and
that.
like even, also this guy phrases of like the rat race, right? You're in the rat race until you're
Right.
not, and then you know these people that when they're young they want to slave away at the you know at the consulting company or the bank for 5 years or 10 years, and then forget about that they're young, but like just want to amass wealth so that the money can work for them, and then they get to this perceived goal of like being free of the employer by making themselves a slave for 10 years, which I think which is I think stupid. But
Mhm.
regardless, I think there's this critical, I don't know if it's a critical velocity or something,
Mhm.
where money starts generating more of itself, and that's of course what leads to this disparity in society of like rich people getting richer and poor people staying poor, because like they don't get escape velocity. I think maybe that's the right term,
Right.
escape
It's
velocity. Yeah,
it's still the compound effect of also of investing that plays
of
a
course,
role, right?
exactly. Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
and there's an educational problem, because I think most people that are in the less wealthy strata of society don't know that you can make money work for you, and don't know how to do these things. So there's some gatekeeping, informational gatekeeping or educational gatekeeping, right, of the rich, because they know how to make money work for themselves.
Right,
And
but at some point, yeah, I agree, and
yeah,
also that opens up another window into this problem with there are a lot of people out there that sell you the dream of like
yeah,
have like generate passive income, right? So
yeah.
I'm just and it's interesting because
And we're doing it right now, right? Listen until the end of this episode to find out how to make
right,
100,000 euros.
right,
Yeah,
but we want to go against it, right? We want to
yeah.
mention it to exactly to go
We're
against.
not lying to you
No,
guys.
right? The point exactly.
That's
No,
what they would say, right?
and they always the idea is like, but show me the results so to prove that you actually
Yeah,
you were
prove what
able.
you're
On the
telling
other
me.
end is like if you were generating, the first rule is like if a person was generating like so many results, why would they take the time to, and it goes alongside what you just
Yeah,
said,
it's
right?
funny because sometimes the book they publish to tell you how to make money is the way they make money, right?
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
their. It's pretty funny. It's like, yeah,
So this thing of passive income, which ultimately exists. It is possible, but I would say that the problem is which one of the two is the machine generating capital or is the investing? Ultimately, I would say is the second, is the investing. Yes, that's passive income, but it's not having a business run by itself. It never happens, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
you can be lucky enough to find the perfect combination and there are these like
There are some
technology,
businesses that are less hands-on than
right?
others, right? For sure.
But all the bureaucracy that you were talking about in the beginning, all the risk of like losing client, there's no like I think COVID also was a very inspiring business wise. I think was a very interesting situation, right? Of course, it was super bad for many other aspects of our lives, but like for the economy, it was interesting to see how all the perspective changed in general, but also the idea that nothing is sure, right? And I think in our lifetime, me and you, right, we had an experience like a economic crisis that I mean we did, but not as like adults, I guess, because the 2008 one was what we I mean I wasn't
I mean,
really
we were adults. I was an adult.
I wasn't I wasn't
What, you
financially
weren't?
adult, I guess. I mean the
Okay,
point,
yeah.
yeah, like
No, no, yeah. Like it kind of went by me because like my brain wasn't. Yeah,
I
I
wasn't
didn't take.
focusing it. I
Yeah,
wasn't investing back then. So it
exactly.
was like I felt it, of course, in the day to day life, but I wasn't aware financially. And so the I think that COVID gave me a perspective into like you're never sure. Like you can have a very good company that's working very well, that is healthy with a lot of clients, and you by the way you always have clients. You always have somebody you have to even if you don't have a boss, your boss is like scattered across the clients you have. Potentially, you
Mm.
can say, right, as a self-employed or as a company. So that's always in your mind, like, and when COVID hit, like a lot of industry were super in trouble because of how like the scenario changed, and so you can do what's called hedging and think, okay, how do I prepare and prevent the next uh, uh, pandemic, right? Like ideally, it's never going to happen, but if it ever happens, how can I do that? And then one starts
Something
thinking,
will happen.
Right. You can start thinking, okay, what if I scatter my clients across, like I generate clients in different areas of the world, right?
Yeah, diversification, right?
Right.
Like we talked in the
Diversification is
finance
a
one. Yeah,
way, but then there are a lot of like drawbacks of that. Like efficiency is harder because you talk to very different perspective. You talk to different clients that have different needs, right? And so there are drawbacks of that. And so the idea is like, since you never know, like you're never sure, going back to the idea of passive income, yes, maybe it can work for a little while. You can have a company that technology gave a lot of the tools that now make you able to basically build a company, a technological company, potentially in many situations by yourself, which is
hmm
amazing, right?
yeah. There's a
The,
lot of commoditization
right.
of tech, so that you can like Shopify and stuff. Like you can open a store so quickly now.
Right. And
Yeah.
also there's this AI trend that's gonna like,
Oh yeah, for
it's
sure.
already changing the perspective and a
Yeah,
lot of
everyone
jobs.
has a free secretary now.
By the way, the aspect of like how AI is gonna like take over our jobs, also it's fascinating, and to talk about another moment, because
Yeah,
people keep thinking, I think there's this misconception of, yeah, it's gonna steal our jobs. But the problem is a lot of the working generation, the baby boomer generation is leaving the workforce
yeah.
very, very soon.
You know what's also funny? This is kind of like a tangent, but I thought it was really funny. I watched a video by Veritasium the other day. I don't know if you know Veritasium,
Oh
like
yeah,
one of my favorite YouTube
yeah.
channels, and he was talking about the invention of the sewing machine, right? So
Hmm.
it's really funny. And then like someone invented the sewing machine and like started a business based on like I don't know sewing really quickly.
Hmm.
I want to say in Paris or something, and then actually a mob of angry tailors stormed this like store and like
Okay.
destroyed all the machines and stuff. You have to think about that because they were so scared of losing their jobs as tailors. And like now, thinking back, like should we have forbidden sewing machines? Like life today would be so
Right.
different if we didn't have sewing machines. And it's like, or like I'm sure the I don't know, some job related to horses, was
Yeah,
like,
for
yeah,
sure, for
exactly.
sure.
And now it's like everyone has a car. So it's like, innovation happens. Like
Yeah.
someone's going to lose their job, but a ton of people will make,
But it's
you know,
not, I would even argue this, that's not even a problem, because right now we're like, we already have a shortage of workers in many different, like the medical field. We have a
yeah,
problem
for
with
sure. I think
doctors,
it's just people have to change what
the
they do.
logistics, manufacturing. There's a huge problem. Like there are not enough people for the things that sustain our society, like production wise, right?
Yeah.
Or taking care of the health of people and education, right? So the
Yeah.
problem,
Caretakers is a big one. I think people
right.
really want to go into these stupid, I don't know, sorry to say that, but stupid accounting jobs and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but
Not
software
even.
can
I
do this.
think there's a
Yeah.
problem with accounting. I think it's now, at least in north of
We
Italy.
need to pay caretakers better, I
Yeah,
think, because
yeah,
like caretaking is so important. And
so
I think,
important.
yeah.
But
Go ahead.
in north of Italy, I would say everybody is either a marketer or a lawyer.
But
That's
that's
the
the
distinction.
thing.
I
It's
don't know
like,
if in
and
Germany is the same.
those, no, for sure, those jobs are going to disappear. Like, I think lawyers are going to disappear, in my opinion. I think I had a discussion with someone the other day about it, and he was a lawyer. He
Yeah,
didn't agree, of course. But I'm like, I think lawyers are going to disappear, or at least they're going to, what they do will change drastically.
yeah.
And I think it's good because like we need more teachers, more caretakers, more. That's what we need, right? Like we need people in the hospitals, we need people in the schools, and so on. And I think in the end, I think those are more fulfilling jobs than copying shit from one Excel to another.
I guess,
Honestly,
yeah, but lawyers do other things as well, right?
of
Yeah,
course, but
but
like, yeah,
overall, there is a problem of shortage is gonna increase even more. So you actually, if technology doesn't take some of our jobs, we're screwed. Like seriously, there's a lot of things that are just gonna go on halt because
yeah,
we're not gonna have people to actually take care of them. So that's one of those fears that I think it's completely irrational. If you look at, I saw the other day a chart. It's crazy. Like there's less, I think, than half. I might be wrong with the numbers, but then half the amount of people that are leaving the workforce are actually entering the workforce.
yeah.
So
I know. I mean, it's always like that. I think it's been like this for hundreds of years.
yeah,
Like whenever some technological revolution happens, people are scared for their jobs. Some of them have a reason to be, but like long term, it's long term just the way
it
work.
challenges the status quo, and so
Yeah, but it'll change, and then
it's
there's
human.
gonna
I
be new
think
types of
it's
jobs.
right.
Yeah.
It's human to
Yeah,
not
people are
like
scared of
change.
change. Yeah,
Yeah.
people are scared of
But
change.
also, there's another interesting thing which is happening, I think, and is that the Western part of the world is not making enough babies. So
Yeah,
there's a procreation problem there, and the eastern part of the world is, fortunately enough, but still, like, that
well, we
also
say
is,
Eastern, but it's not really Eastern. I think like Japan and Korea and stuff, they don't make enough babies. It's
no,
not about Eastern.
but
It's
India,
like
China, right? Like there are
China. Actually,
countries.
no. China is not growing anymore. China, I think China has a negative population growth
Probably does.
right now. India it does, and then Africa, right? Sub-Saharan Africa
Yeah,
is growing
true,
really quickly. Yeah.
true. Good point.
Anyway, like when we say Western, like we mean like Western Hemisphere,
Yeah.
like Europe and US. But I think Eastern Asia is the same. Like I think Japan and Korea are like such good examples of populations not growing. Maybe it's Northern and Southern Hemisphere or something. Actually,
Yeah, could be.
yeah,
Good point. But yeah, so in general, that also is interesting by itself because it's going to change the way we live a lot, I think,
yeah,
because
yeah, for sure.
it's there's a need. And also, don't want to get political at all, but this immigration
But I
thing,
will anyway.
no, but just to say, like, it's food for thoughts about this
People,
immigration
yeah, people being scared
preventing,
of immigration, like oh, they
right?
take
Like,
our jobs, and like we don't have
think
enough
about
jobs.
it twice because we need people. Like, there's a problem, especially, I mean,
Uh,
Italy has a really huge deficit
oh,
in
now we're gonna
people.
lose all the listeners that are
Yeah,
against immigration.
no,
I
but I
don't
mean, I'm just saying,
care.
I don't want to say anything. I'm just saying,
No, no,
food for
of course.
thoughts. Think about
No,
it.
for
Like,
sure.
the
I mean,
perspective has to be,
also historically, what would I mean? Most like super powerful economies, they would be nothing without immigration.
right.
Like Germany, England, the US, like they benefited so much from immigration. France, right? It's like, I mean, whatever, different discussion.
Of course, needs to be regulated, of course. Okay, coming back to the main topic. So on the passive income side, so the idea is, think about it as like the second step. You first need to generate income somehow,
Hmm,
and
hmm.
capital,
Yep.
and that's not passive. It takes a lot of work, and so
Unless you
one,
inherit from your daddy.
right. But even there, you need to learn the skills because otherwise you lose it all. Or
Yeah, yeah,
unless
for
you have
sure.
so much that you can lose it all for your entire life, but that's another topic.
I
But
mean, yeah, there
so,
are.
and then one very important aspect is because one could think, and I've some people ask me, like, not because I'm so expert, but just because I was older than them, and so I went through life a bit more,
Yeah,
and ask me, like, what should I do after university, right? Like,
yeah,
should
yeah.
I take a job, be employed, be self-employed? The idea is, the main concept is, think about getting, and that's what I'm following, by the way, by myself every day, right? For myself, think about, like, getting what I think it was Naval Ravikant that calls
Who?
specific knowledge. Naval, the previously founder of AngelList
Oh,
investor.
yeah, I know who. I forgot his name, but yeah,
Naval,
yeah.
I think it's Naval.
Okay.
And he talks about this, I think, fascinating term, which is specific knowledge, which is the intersection between, you get multiple, basically, multi, um, I would say multi-sector, multi-industry, but it's not even that. Like, different sets of knowledge intersecting each other, and so you basically combine knowledge from different areas, and you become the expert of a very specific thing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And this, it's immediate value, because then you become the only or the main person that's able to provide the best service for that specific need. And now, the point with this is, like, it might sound so complicated to, like, figure out which one is the specific knowledge. I think, and it goes back to, like, what you want in life, and thinking about that is, like, think about your passions. If you don't have them, one quick way to think about your passion is, like, think about something that you like, focus more on it, it will become your passion. Like, ultimately, time is of the essence. Like, there's this other concept of the 10,000 hours. Like, the more you spend time, the more you become a pro of something.
yeah,
The shortcut is, if you become better at something many times, you actually start liking it more, right? It's with
yeah,
anything like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So if you follow what you like, and if you have interest in different areas, which is key, right? Not one thing, then ultimately you end up, without thinking, building knowledge in these areas, and then there's always some sort of connection between aspects of life and
yeah,
areas.
yeah.
And
I think there's sorry. There,
yeah,
I
go ahead.
think I think a lot of innovation generally happens when two two things mixed that haven't been mixed before, right?
Mm,
So often big innovations, big Nobel prizes, inventions, whatever, come from people that changed fields, right? They come from, let's say, they come from physics and go into medicine or something, and then they bring the knowledge of what they did before to another area and revolutionize it. I think this happens so often. I think this
right.
is kind of like what you're saying, right? Like the intersection of two subjects, the mixing of two colors makes a new vibrant color that hasn't existed before, and really changes everything.
Right. And there's abundance of opportunities, especially if you get
Yeah,
out there.
blue
So
ocean, right? Yeah.
right. And so the point is really think about what you like, follow that. And again, I'm talking about something that I'm following every day, right? And you never know where it gets. Of course, there's the famous speech of a lot of quotes today. The famous speech of Steve Jobs that says, you just follow your passion, and then you'll connect the dots eventually later,
Was
right?
that the commencement speech he did?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same concept, right? You
Yeah.
you you'll know later, and so and also today everything is so fast that it won't take so long, like to for that to happen. So I think this is one important aspect. So if you focus on figure out, do you want to be employed, self-employed? Um, what's your ideal work environment, like hybrid, smart working? Do you want more freedom? So you try you if you have the ideal scenario in mind, it's easier to get there, and step by step you will, if you push through. And then the idea is gain knowledge. If being eager to learn, we both are, I think. So we like learning things, but um, in a way, it's a muscle. I would argue, right? The more
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
learn about one thing, the more you want to learn about something else. Like if you enjoy learning something and you follow through, you'll see that you'll enjoy learning about other things.
Hmm.
And and so that's, I think, the starting point. And then you can get like more into we can get more into the specifics of, okay, so what, let's say, being employed, there is like different path you can take, and you could distinguish really three kinds of companies. There is the startup, the medium sized company, and there's the enterprise, right?
Hmm.
If you have to make it very simple. And so there are differences, huge differences, right? So in the startup environment, have you basically test and try many different things, also roles, you wear different hats, so you learn a little of a lot of things, you could argue. And on the medium sized company, I think it's kind of a toned down version of that. You still learn a lot on different things, but not so many things. And on the enterprise, you tend to have a very fixed role and very fixed set tasks that you
Yeah.
have to do.
Yeah. More specialization. Yeah.
So in a way, figuring out and testing, I wouldn't say, I don't think I had experience. I didn't have experience on the medium size. I tried the startups and I tried enterprise, and I got a sense, and I'm like, okay, fine. But I think if one doesn't know, that's also another thing to test, like trying these three levels of companies to figure out and get. And also, that's very interesting because the moment you want to start something of your own, you have a frame of reference of what it means. That's super
Yeah.
important. So, yeah, I think this is what the first aspect is really that, like figuring out, trying out different ways of working, figuring out the one that you like best, and
Hmm.
then stick with it. And there's also another interesting aspect about age, right? There's this idea, the usual Western society belief is you have to follow through university,
Yeah.
I mean, to school, and then ideally go to university or and get a job, and everything has to happen in a specific time frame, right? Especially with a career being employed, unfortunately, there are a lot of constraints with how much of a break you can take between jobs,
Yeah.
or how much even you ideally should stay in a company. There's even that's
Yeah. Yeah.
crazier, right? If you stay too little, and they see that like you keep changing a job, like it's a feeling of like, okay, I can't rely on this person, he will do it again, right? On
Yeah.
the other end, if you
Yeah, if people
stick,
look at my CV, like I think no one wants to hire me because like I've never had any job for like more than a year because like I get so bored and I want to do something else. But yeah,
right,
exactly. Also, I think there used to be. I mean, maybe it's still the case, but I think it's getting less and less. Like you were not supposed to have a gap on your CV. Like if there's a year where you don't do anything, it's supposed to be really bad. I don't know if it's still the case because if it's still the case, I'm fucked if ever
the
want to be
actual
employed.
gap, I think, like you have to motivate why you took the year off. I
Yeah,
think it's not bad
but
because
it's getting better, right? Because like it's more accepted now to
yeah,
like travel for a year or to work on some other project. I think like 50 years ago it was different, but I think now it's much more
true, it
accepted.
is. But also, it again, it's not. I don't think it's seen so bad now. But it's like you have to explain why you did that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
another. But yeah, so the I think it makes sense in a way. It makes sense to think of the career has to have a specific path, and it's understandable why there are these rules. Although like in your example, that's a clear indication to me. If I were to see your CV, I would say this person needs to be an entrepreneur. Like
well,
I
yeah,
think the
probably.
best antidote to skipping jobs is really like find something to work on that you like by
Yeah, yeah,
yourself. And this is one of the aspects that would make me think that, right? And so on the other end, the if you like, there's the other aspect of what about those that are college dropout and they find something that they want to work on and they just stop education and just focus on working. I would argue, I mean, it's the best MBA or master you can think of. Like working by yourself teaches you so many things.
yeah,
And lately, I mean, this to this age, like you can find anything you want to learn online. So if you have a practical application of what you want to learn, it's actually the best way to learn.
yeah,
So what really after a certain point, like of course you need school, but after a certain level, it's more, they say it's more the network than anything else.
yeah. I think. I mean, this is definitely a strong opinion of mine, but I think studying business is such a waste of time because like I think you remember the podcast you sent me from that
Yeah,
eggcartons.com
yeah,
woman. Yeah, so there's this fantastic podcast. I thought it was really fun because she like told her story and like how she basically didn't learn anything in business school
yeah.
and learned everything just buying a company. She had no money, she bought a company, and then made a ton of money with it, and she learned how to be an entrepreneur
Real
doing.
story,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's a real story, and like it's I've never studied business, so this is me judging from my
But
ivory
I
tower.
totally agree. Business
Yeah,
by itself is like a empty container, right? You want
yeah,
to you want to learn like the applications of and there, yeah, that's a separate topic, but I agree. Like it's the and also there's this other aspect of rules. There's one thing called laws, which are there for a reason, but then the common knowledge rules, the common sense rules, sometimes need to be broken.
yeah,
And actually that's where you find opportunity, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so this idea, the example you mentioned of this on that podcast is great because I never thought, oh, it's actually possible to buy a company without putting any money up front, any
Yeah,
of
she
your own
put
money.
no money down. None of the money was hers. It was really, I mean, it's super clever of her. Yeah,
And of course it's maybe an exception, maybe we'll see that it's not, and other people after that episode will actually do. It's a
yeah.
very famous podcast, so like I'm sure millions of people actually listen to
What
that.
was what's the name of the podcast?
It's
My first.
my first
Yeah,
million, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
And her name is Sarah something, right?
Moore, I think Sarah
Sarah
Moore,
Moore.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so I think the goal of that episode was really like to inspire people to see that actually even that is possible. And so
yeah.
thinking,
It made me think I should do that. Also, I thought it was
right,
pretty fun.
and
Really
me
fun to
too,
listen to.
right?
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
it pushes your imagination of like what is possible. I know that's historical, that's super important, right? Like if you somebody does something for the first time, it's like I read this, I think it's a real what really happens in sport, right? Think about running. The first time that somebody breaks a record of like, I don't know, like fast five the fastest 50 meters run, right, in the world, and it takes a lot of
Admittedly,
time.
you just run 50 meters. I think
No, but
everyone
there's
else.
that. There's also that, right? Yeah,
Well, we
we're
don't want to run
lazy. We're
100
lazy.
meters there.
But yeah, or 5K, right? The fastest 5K in the world, and that takes a lot of time. But then once one has done it, it makes it, for some reason, it's actually easier to break that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Or not even to break that, because otherwise it will be a new record, but to actually to match that or closely get there. And so
yeah,
people, like, especially if there is a breakthrough in speed, right? And so
yeah,
that shows, like, okay, because people think, everyone thinks, okay, if one did it, there's this saying, like, one person did it, then you can too, most of the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
And so it's very, very inspiring. And I think that's why business rules, yes, are useful to know, but you don't want to stick to them too much, because there are some that are good, but most of the times it's a case by case. You have to figure out your own path, because it's so complicated otherwise to try and, like, trace what are like, if the rules are met or not. But principles, I guess the difference is between business principles and rules. Business principles are important, right? You
yeah.
need customers, right? Otherwise you don't have a business. Like, there are important principles, and that you should always think about. But then, yeah, so once you figure out the path, employed, self-employed, or starting a company, on the employed is really figuring out the best approach, and then you can start generating that capital. And then you have to know those rules, the rules of being employed. And it's for some people, right? Personally, I always didn't like the idea that my next promotion or my increase of salary was dependent on a boss, a person
Yeah,
that I had to convince, right?
yeah,
I was like, what if I go out there in the world and I prove myself in practice by doing things without having to convincing a person, or having to behave in a certain way around the person, and I just get the results I want, way freeing, like more. And so that's the idea. I wanted freedom, not depending on others. And so that's why I decided to go in the self-employed side. But it depends. If you are instead of person that likes that, then it's great. And then if you instead want to build a company, then there are a few interesting, I think, things to consider, principle to consider, right? Like, and again, they are not rules, so very nice if you prove me wrong on this, right? But one aspect is, will you go for a product or a service? Um, like, that's interesting, because I think it's it seems, I would say, it's more fun in a way for people to think about creating a product.
yeah. I think the product idea is that people think it's more passive at the end, right? Because once you create the product, you can keep generating income with the product, whereas your service is always your time, technically, right?
Yeah.
Software as a service is kind of a weird hybrid, because you created the product once, but you sell it as a service, right? It's as a service. So I think as a service is a better business model, maybe, but like creating a product seems more passive, because like if you're a cleaner or something, like you actually sell your time, unless you start outsourcing the cleaning, like you're always gonna have to invest time to get money. But the product, like once I think like people, there's people that just invent stuff. Once you have the invention, you can just get royalties for the invention. So it's like the process of creating the thing is done, and for service, it's not.
Yeah, it's like writing a book. You write a book,
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
book sells, and you get passive income for sure. But the problem is, it's way harder. I mean, at least my experience is, building products is way harder than building services. First of all,
Yeah.
the
Probably.
the,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
initial effort is way higher,
Yeah.
because you have to invest, or either a
Yeah.
lot of time, let's say writing a book, or a lot of, like, resources to
Yeah.
actually build the product. And the problem is, there's this prototyping phase, which with everything, right? Even when you write a book, while you write it, you might want opinions, right? You have an editor, somebody that, like,
Yeah.
gives you
Yeah.
feedback, right? With everything, there's this, like, prototyping phase, and it's super hard to get, um, in a way, like, candid feedback, not because people don't want to give you, but because it's super difficult, I think, to distinguish, and find what the feedback, the reason of the feedback, because it's easier, like, you might say something, but you might mean something else. When you talk to people, it's very hard to, I think, pinpoint the actual nature of the feedback. and also there's the subjective aspect, which is important, right? You can do a prototyping phase, but if it's too limited, you might miss out, and the product might actually be good, but then
Yeah.
you're just targeting the wrong people.
I
So
also think. I also think. Sorry to interrupt. I
no, go
think.
ahead.
I think when you create a product, you need it to be innovative in some way. Like you need it to be better than
Yeah,
what has existed before. With services, that doesn't necessarily need to be the case because, like, everyone understands a service has a certain cost, and it's just there's just several people offering the service, and you just pick one. I mean, you can, of course, you can differentiate yourself, but like in general, if you invent or create a new product, you need to, at least on paper, you need it to be new and different from what has existed before. Otherwise people will not buy from you, and there's this initial cost of creating it and so on, which is much more expensive in the beginning. I think maybe the sweet spot really is starting offering a service and turning it into a product at a later point, which is possible, right?
true,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that's the productizing aspect. It's you could say in rather new movement, but it's super interesting because it has a point and it frees up then a lot of the problems that you have with servicing.
Yeah.
um, and but yeah, so I would argue, again, we're going to talk now for a little while about building a company, entrepreneurship, just because I think it's an important thing to mention in this system of the what I call the waterfall principle of, like, you build the capital and then you get it to generate passive income for you. It's easier to generate more capital by starting a company or building, becoming self-employed, than by being an employee. But it's not easier when you do, like, the operations of it, way harder, we know, but once you do it right, it's actually easier. If you are an employee, it doesn't I don't agree with the fact that, like, if you're an employee you cannot build wealth. It's not true. Depends, but the rules of the game, I don't know them so well to get too much into that, first. And second, the perspective I had at this point is that you play a very different game, because you have to basically get to the top if you want to get a good higher salary, or you get more, like there's things called stock options and like different aspects that you can get when you're in the management side of a company. And so that's a way, but it's probably faster if you're self-employed and you do it right.
Yeah, I also think that, getting wealthy with a job has an inherent limitation because there's like I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but like I think there's a limited amount of capital that is being split between all the employees in the world, let's say, and you're always competing for these high paying jobs versus if you're creating your own job, you're literally creating an own segment of the market or something. You might create capital that hasn't existed versus you competing with other people for that salary.
Yeah. And there's the misalignment that we talked about in the beginning of, like, if your employer is overpaying you, it's inefficient. And so unless it doesn't figure, like, ideally it will eventually. And so it's harder to, like, you really have to be at the top. And like there's a lot of time that you spend trying to get to the top, which is your income level is not that high. Then eventually it becomes higher, and potentially, it becomes faster for you to build this waterfall. But otherwise, in the same span of time, if you focus on building a company, eventually it could be faster. That said, it's harder because you don't just say, okay, I build a company and then the company works. There's a lot of work involved. And then again, it goes back to, like, what's your choice? They are both options, but I would say way faster. And if you really are a person that wants to focus on that, building a company, it's a faster way to actually get to
Yeah, it's
the
probably also
results.
personality type. I think some people find it easier to walk like a path that has been tread by other people before and like have a clear picture of like how what the goalposts are, what the intermediate steps are. You know exactly how to do it, how to navigate to the top because the path exists before you. Like someone has done it
Yeah.
before. You just have to follow in their steps. And I think if you create your own company, it's like uncharted territory. Like you don't know where it's going to go. You might fail. You might need to reinvent yourself and so on. Right. So it's maybe also a personality thing, I think.
It is. But also, that's why the hybrid situation, the one I'm experimenting with more and more every day, to
Mm.
me, it's very interesting because you get the best of both. And so a bit more security, but on the other end, unlimited upside.
Yeah.
And so that's potentially, I don't know. I haven't seen so much of that happening outside out there, but I think some companies are doing that. But the main, to make it very simple, it's where the people that work with you get a stake into the results of the company. So in that case, it's a hybrid because they're like, it's not their company, but on the other hand, they're not employees. They don't just get a fixed amount or maybe a
Yeah.
bonus, but they actually get a percentage of what they produce,
Yeah, I
which
think many startups do that, right? Smaller
I think
companies
they're
and
starting.
startups. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of them, like
But this work for
small,
equity
yeah.
thing is, to me, I'm really against it in a way because it's a smokescreen, really. Like, work for equity, ultimately, you work a lot for a promise of some equity, some
So
percentage
what
point.
do you mean by the hybrid model then? You don't
I
mean that?
mean, no, I mean that, let's say if your bonus is directly dependent, is a specific percentage on the income you generate the company.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, I've seen that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's not that common, right? Of course it exists, but it's not that common, and I think it's not just a set amount of bonus, because many times bonuses are like, you either reach the goal or you don't. And if you reach the goal and surpass the goal, you get a specific absolute number bonus, right?
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you don't reach the goal, I'm sorry, try next year.
yeah,
And again, that's not proportional. I don't think it's, yeah, there's a lot going on there. So I think this, it's what I call the hybrid, where you really get a percentage, direct percentage, immediate, because there's in finance, in when we talk about economics, there's, timing is an important aspect. Money
yeah,
today is not the same as money tomorrow, right? So that's why I'm really against work for equity, because it's like you're getting a promise that the few bits or a little bit more percentage points that you're getting in the future might be worth something. And
yeah,
this is, and you're getting paid less now for that. So
yeah,
it's like trying to force you to get the entrepreneurial skin in the game risk, right,
yeah,
that
yeah.
entrepreneurs have, without really the benefits of it, because you don't get so much out of it, right? So that, and you are also, you don't have so much saying into what happens and the direction of the company,
Yeah, it depends a
because
little bit on the company, I guess,
it does,
and
it depends.
it depends on how early you are, because like if you're the fourth employee, like,
Of course,
yeah,
that's different. But
yeah,
then majority, unfortunately, yeah, in a startup, you can structure it better than what I just said, for sure.
yeah.
Um,
But like, so what you're saying, the hybrid model is really what is already the case for like lots of sales positions and stuff, right? Like where people get a base salary and then commissions based on what they sell, right?
True, that's, you get a commission, but then the percentage tends to be capped a lot in the commission
Yeah,
side
yeah,
on
yeah,
sales. Here, you can go higher, and also there's the aspect of, I mean, one could argue that you really get a percentage of your direct work in sales, right? Like, but what I'm talking about is more holistic. Like, it's,
yeah. The companies, yeah, they, I mean, they want to measure your personal impact, but sometimes it's not direct, right? So that's true.
yeah,
Like
there's a
you can,
combination of
yeah.
percentages.
Actually, so I have a few friends that I think have a model like this with their company. Like I have two friends in real estate, for example, and they, I think, the entire company's bonuses are just a share of the marginal profits
Mm.
of their I don't know, of the company or of the department or something for that year.
That's pretty
So
cool. That's pretty cool. And also, there are these companies like owned by employees. That's another interesting model,
yeah, yeah,
because yeah, the employees own companies. Very cool to look at, because they have, the incentive is aligned. That's what I
yeah,
like, right?
yeah,
People
yeah.
that work in it, they have a portion of the end result, and so they collaborate more. It just aligns a lot of us.
I think it'll move because like you see these movements of like quiet quitting and stuff where people just
Yeah.
do the bare minimum, and I think companies will notice that something needs to change. I don't know what the best way is, because like I also think that we need to move away from uh, 48 hour 40-hour weeks and all this
Yeah.
stuff. I think it's stupid to pay people for certain time windows like 9 to 5 or whatever it is. I think it's dumb because like a lot of people just sit on their computer and like browse their Instagram and whatnot, and instead of being productive, because like it's hard to, at least it has been hard to measure productivity, and I think you can easily waste time and just sit there and do nothing. And in at least in the tech world, it's a little bit more common to I guess applaud laziness, because like the best programmer is usually the laziest, because he makes the most
Yeah,
efficient
yeah.
program.
The 10x programmers. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. No, it's true, and I think yeah, it's a bigger conversation on that, because I think it's a problem with the incentive. Is really the problem is in the incentive,
Yeah, yeah,
and if you put it too much on on productivity, of course you have to understand that everybody has downtime, so it has to be kind of balanced, because you can't expect the maximum every day from everyone.
yeah,
But on the other end, I'm sure there are a lot of inefficiencies. Especially the bigger the company, the more the inefficiencies, because the harder it is to track these things that you mentioned,
yeah, yeah,
and there's a lot of bureaucracy, and so you actually waste a lot of time not actually working, because you have to take care of bureaucracy and
yeah,
internal
for
political
sure.
aspects, which is a waste. So
Yeah,
there's something to be said in like keeping a company small also. But so just to touch on the product versus service, I think the idea is, if you want to build a company, my suggestion at least, start with a service, because you have direct communication, direct feedback from your clients. You understand what works and what not way faster than with a product. You don't have many times, not every time, depending on what you do, but most of the times you don't have a lot of initial capital investment needed, or very little. And the prototyping phase is super fast.
yeah. I
So
also think something super important is that the clients know what they're buying, because a new product you have to convince
yeah,
people. But if you're starting a cleaning business, people know exactly what they're buying. I'm buying a cleaner. I know what a cleaner is worth. Like, if you can make a cleaning business, even if it's not the best business in the world in the beginning, you'll have income, and you can grow it to be a more efficient business with time. But with a product, like, you have to convince people of your product right away. So I think
yeah.
that's a little bit different. Yeah.
And also, the simpler you can explain the service, the more clients you
Exactly.
get.
Exactly.
There's
Yeah.
also that, right? And then the other big aspect is like, would you go B2C or B2B, like business to consumer? Would you
Yeah.
sell to consumers, or
Yeah.
would you sell to businesses? And here again, I have a straight answer, which is start with B2B, because not just because it might be my experience, but because it's way easier to find companies than to find individuals and communicate with them on a
Probably.
larger scale.
Also, usually companies are willing to pay more in general. Um, so I
True.
think I think certain expenses are expected for companies, and you can actually sell the same service to a company for much higher price than to a private person, even though it's exactly the
Yeah.
same. There's
True.
so many like pieces of software that the corporate version costs like a trillion times more than the personal version, which is ridiculous. And then you can go like institutional slash academic versions of software, and they're, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, a software that would cost like $50 a month for a person, or like $10 a month for a person, uh, suddenly you sell like the corporate version or the institutional version to a university, and it's like 10,000 per month or something.
But there's a reason why, right? It's what they call the value based pricing and not cost based pricing, right? You price something based on the value that they're going to get out of, and one individual it's not going to get too much value out of that. I mean, it might get some value out of a
Yeah,
product, but it's
yeah,
not comparable to a business, right? So because the business will make more money eventually because of that, if it's
yeah, yeah, of
valuable,
course,
it
of course, of course.
indirectly or directly. So that's, and then there's another point important, which I think is, what should I do? Like, okay, let's say I want to do a service for B2B. What should I do, right? And there, I think an important aspect is to think that ideas are nothing. Really, the execution is everything, and trying things, and that's part of the learning experience. That's why starting a company or starting your own business, it's a super master, I guess, because you really get to try things out and figure
Yeah,
out and
yeah,
test.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think those were the main points, about like starting a business, and and not the main points, but the initial points, the starting points, right? And then there could be a lot of other things we can talk about, but there's a lot of effort involved. And but then once you start generating that capital, you can funnel that into more passive ways of generating income. And as you said, like at some point there is this to be said about, there's a threshold, right? um, Everyone has their own standard of living, economics, and what they, how much they want to spend every month, every year, etc., and or their financial goals. But you might at some point reach a level where you don't really, like, all your needs, main needs, are taken care of, and that's where uh, investing becomes easier and faster, right?
Yeah.
Does that. And I think that's where things get way faster also on the passive income side, because the more you invest, the more you get out of it if you do it wisely. And and so, like, I think I don't think we talked about anything non-conventional, honestly. but the main, I think the main idea here, the main process is, generate capital and then put it at work so that you gain that freedom that we initially discussed as one of the main points, I think.
Yeah,
um,
I think probably people that listen to this, they'd be interested in more actionable things, because a lot of this was like very generalistic, and I wonder if either we can give examples of what people could do,
yeah.
or we talk about what we have done. So maybe that's something we could do.
Absolutely. So if we talk about building a company or going self-employed, like starting your own freelancer business, it goes back to this that knowledge that we discussed. So if you have some interest, the best thing to do as a start is to figure out who does that for a job, figure out how they do it. It's not really about copying, but it's about getting inspiration. And if you like something, you have an opinion on it, right? Most of the times you might have, and the more you know something, the more you have a stronger opinion generally on it. And so by looking at what other people do already and how they make money out of that area of interest, you might spot something that they're doing that is not what you think it would work.
Yeah. Okay.
And
So
yeah,
no, I was thinking maybe we could give some examples. I have some examples because, of course,
like
we both,
example of actual, okay, yeah,
yeah, of actual real life people. I mean, we could talk about ourselves, but also I was just thinking something, because it goes along the lines of what you said, and maybe we can each give an example or two. So, for example, I dance, right? And
yeah,
I know a lot of people in the dancing space, and when I say dance, I mean like Latin dance, so a very particular type of dance. So there's a community where people are really excited about this thing, and you can find ways to make a living out of offering services in that area or creating products for that area. So if I take the example of dance, but it could be really anything, and we can talk about more examples. One of my friends, for example, she started teaching, right? So she started teaching dance. So that's a service, right? She's offering a service to people. And teaching actually is a good example, because like everyone, not everyone, but like once you get to a certain level of skill with something, there's someone with less skill than you, and even if you're not the best at it, you can teach it to them or do it for them, right? So you can,
hmm,
as long as you do it a little bit better than someone else, they can outsource the thing to you, either through teaching or doing the thing. So in dancing, like no one wants to buy someone to dance for them instead of
right,
themselves. But
right.
like usually, like let's say it's cleaning. Let's say you don't want to clean. You clean better than someone else. Like you offer a cleaning service, right? You can clean someone's apartment, and once you do it a thousand times, you will be better than the average person at cleaning or whatever it may be. And for
Because you're
dancing,
buying
yeah,
the result, right? In both scenarios, what you really buy is the outcome of the service,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Would you agree? Like in the cleaning, you want the house spot clean, right?
yeah,
In dancing, you want to know how to dance.
yeah.
So ultimately, you're
Well,
buying
maybe
the
not.
outcome.
Maybe not for everything. Like a massage, you want an hour massage, but you want a good massage. So yeah, I
You
mean,
want to feel better after, no?
yeah, I guess, yeah.
Anyway,
But I mean, it could be a massage business also, right? There's
yeah.
actually there's certain types of businesses that are super commonly done by certain uh, groups of people. Let's say, I mean, this is like there's a lot of generalization in this, but uh, there's certain, for example, certain groups of immigrants that open certain types of businesses. I think you know that everyone knows this from
But
their
I
own
think
city. Yeah,
taking your example of the massage, right? Because
yeah,
it's really fascinating to me about thinking about potential business opportunities, right?
yeah,
I do it every time. So, like, let's take that example, right? I recently started getting Thai massages, right?
Yeah, same.
And
That's
and
that's what I meant by when I when
right,
I said like certain groups of people. I think that the Thai community oftentimes is known for the Thai massages, so they tend to open massage
right,
parlors too.
true. And what I was like, okay, let's find in my area, let's find a good one that was not too expensive, because if I want to
Hmm.
take a Thai massage every week, that becomes kind of expensive if they cost. And I figured that yes, there's one. I tried a few, and I started seeing like what they were doing, and I started thinking, wow, there are so many things you can improve here. First of all, the places, they don't look so well, most of them, and there are some that do. And in the end, I found one that's good enough. It's a good balance of cost, and like comfort of the place and everything else, right? So that's one aspect of it. And then the other thing is how much they charge, and what are the options available, right? And
Yeah.
so I think this is a good way. It's a good research. You have to do research first, and it's a good way to like figure out what can you offer that stands out, even in the service side. Yes,
Yeah,
innovation.
once you become a consumer of that thing, you know what you're looking for as a consumer, so you know what to offer, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
figuring out what you're missing, it's one of the best starting points, because meaning what you would like that is not available. But it's one of those things that the harder you look into, the less it comes. I mean, at least my experience, right? It's one of those things that you just go about with life, and you just focus on noticing things without focusing on, I have to figure out, there's something in my life that I need that I don't have. What is it? And you
Yeah,
sit down.
often it's something you're really frustrated about. You're
Right,
like, why isn't there a massage parlor that
right.
has heated cushions or whatever it is, right? I'm just inventing stuff
Why
here.
there's not a massage place, since we have that example, like that is costing less than $40. 40
Yeah,
bucks, it's too much if I want to do it every week, right?
yeah, yeah.
And then you start thinking about the mechanics. Why? Is it because the hourly rate, that I'm paying? Is it because the renting of the place is too expensive? Like, there are multiple different things. And yes, it's not. That's what when we said it's not easy, is because if it were that easy, everybody would have done it already, right? So
Yeah,
the
yeah, of
reason,
course.
but there might be overseen things that people oversee.
I mean, sometimes, especially very established types of businesses, they are not very efficient, and they aren't rethinking things because they're just doing something that their
Yeah.
father or mother has done or something their friends are doing. So they're not rethinking stuff. There's a very famous business book in Germany, which I'm gonna try to translate it. It's like brain beats capital or something.
Hmm.
So it's a super famous business book here. It's along the same lines as the 4 Hour Work Week or something, where um, it tries to tell people that everyone can be an entrepreneur. And what he did is, I don't even remember how he picked the business, but he was like, why is tea so effing expensive? Like, and then
Hmm.
he tried to figure out what's so expensive about tea. So he went to these plantations in India and stuff, and then he realized there's like a billion middlemen, and there's a lot of packaging stuff. And so he just started buying directly from the plantations, putting them in like 500-gram packages instead of like these little tea bags and stuff, and sold like super high quality organic tea for like much cheaper than all the competitors. And now he's like super rich, right? So this is an example from a book.
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah,
is. It is cool. Exactly. Like, it's about noticing things, but it's not about like focusing too much on finding one. Like, they come to you, and I think it really is interesting to see, because in a way it gives you a window into how other people go about things, and it also opens a window into what makes people do what they like, what makes them tick, what makes them decide, right?
yeah,
So building a business is a lot about understanding what other people want, and I
yeah,
think it's very, very interesting. It's an interesting exercise for sure.
yeah. You can also go the way of Sarah Moore, and just look at a business,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't even have to be. She did. I mean, she did something different, because she was like literally looking for a business to buy, and she didn't even care what she was buying. But if you have a regular life, you interact with businesses all the time, and maybe one of the businesses you interact with, you kind of like it, and it's profitable, but you wish they would do something differently, and you could be the person buying the business and making them do what you want them to do. So let's say you have this favorite massage parlor that you go to, and you're like, oh man, if they only put better lighting in here, they would have like 10 times more customers. So you could go and say to the boss, look, I want to buy your your massage parlor for X amount of dollars. And then you do the thing, right? So you improve the interior of the thing, but everything else stays the same. And then suddenly there's 10 times the clients. So you just bought a business and you made the profit 10x, right? So
Yeah.
because you were a client, so you knew how this thing bothered you, and you just buy the business and change it. Or the alternative is to start your own, but if the business is already there, you could technically buy it.
And
For
by the
for
way,
yeah,
no, just one point here, to add on that. Like, one good way to figure out these things is to work in an industry, is to work in a company
yeah.
first and spot what's being done not properly.
So yeah, I think there's a couple of ways, right? There's the you are part of the industry and that's why you notice, or you are a customer of that industry and that's why
Yeah.
you notice, right? So there's these two
I
ways.
guess the third one is the hardest, which is you're neither of those and you
And you're
just
trying to
spot something.
research. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is what Sarah Moore did, right? She
Yeah.
she just like looked at a billion different businesses.
Because and she mentioned the podcast in the episode as well, like she mentioned how like she started and she knew nothing about it. So
Exactly. That's
there's
crazy.
also
Yeah.
that if you're part of the business, you at least know how things should run. At least you think you know how they should run, and then you test it. And if you're a consumer, you know how what's the outcome. And I think focusing on the outcome is important, because going about the massage example, maybe there's really no way in your area to build a massage parlor that is cheaper, but there might be other ways to achieve the same outcome. So
Yeah.
that's also interesting to look at, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I just wanted to actually finish the thought on my
Yep.
friend that is a dancer. I mean, I'm a dancer too, but this was her plan. So I think she started renting some studio space and started giving classes herself. And then, she got students, and of course, there's always marketing and sales involved. So she did marketing, of course, but you can technically outsource the marketing. But
Mhm.
oftentimes, I think you can't get around sales and marketing. But then she started getting other friends in the community to teach for her, and then she stopped actually teaching herself, and now she's just growing the school. And I think they own their own space now and they are expanding.
Yeah.
So now she actually is owning a big dance business, and
Okay.
she's just started it as a little dance teacher. So this is just an example.
And that's the same friend that says that she now doesn't like the her passion became her work, and now she
No, no,
doesn't.
different friend,
Okay.
different friend.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Because there's also an aspect there, like the business might take over and might distance you from the actual thing that initially sparked your interest,
Well,
but
I think the
there's a
cool thing
way
with
to
her,
go
yeah,
around it.
sorry.
Yeah.
No,
No, go
the
ahead.
cool. So the other one, she was a professional dancer, right? And she made the dancing itself her job. And this friend doesn't, right? She has a dance related business, but the dancing itself isn't her job, right? Because she's now just managing the dance related business.
So the
But
upside end, she can dance whenever she wants because she has a.
exactly. So she actually did it. Arguably, she did it much better because she basically owns a school and she has teachers that teach for her. But the dancing itself, she can now do for fun, and she's trying to work towards not working full time at all. Like I think she's
Mm,
not even working full time, but like
mm.
she's working towards not even having to be present at all. So you can. This is just an example.
Yeah, that speaks to freedom. That's a great example,
Exactly.
because it's, yeah,
Yeah.
it goes back to the
But like
initial.
I mean, you know other people that have started businesses. So what's another example?
I mean, there are, let me think. I honestly don't have an example that turned the passion into which I think are more inspiring as examples, right?
Yeah, I think we both know a lot of people that did software just because of our
Yeah.
backgrounds. So I mean, Matteo and I, we both started software related companies, and we have a lot of friends that did as well. So I'm thinking of one of our friends who started as a consultant for mobile app developers, I think,
Hmm.
and then he started at some point. I think like he grew and grew, and then they did consulting mostly, or like custom services for companies. And at some point, he turned it into a product, and now he has like a few very high paying clients. And yeah, he basically doesn't work anymore. He has his team, and I think he works. I mean, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but like 10 hours a week or so, just managing stuff. And mostly he's just traveling around and playing chess and doing whatever he wants to, learning new things. I think so. That's another possibility, but
Yeah,
it's not the cute little turn your passion into
right.
kind of
But
thing.
but then it frees you up to do other things, right? There's always, and it goes back to like what you really want out of it. Because personally, I would always want to like do something that like creating things is one of the things that makes me passionate the most. So, and they could be different areas, different industries, different, but creating outcomes, let's say, also, if to put it better, it's one of the things that interests me the most. Because so, and this kind of validation of the things you create and the outcomes you create from others, it's addictive in a way
Yeah,
by itself. And so, and it's especially if you do it for the good, right? That makes it even more fulfilling. And that's where I think, to conclude on this, I think that's where you hit jackpot, when you get the income side and the fulfillment side both taken care of, and you do something that you enjoy doing. Of course, there are always going to be things that you don't enjoy doing. Everything you do, unfortunately, there's always that aspect.
yeah,
But you mostly do things you enjoy doing, and you get fulfillment by like achieving the goals you set yourself to, for others and for yourself. And the income part makes you free to like choose how to spend your focus and your day on, which is another very interesting aspect. So hopefully that was useful. And this like concept of the, I don't know why I call it the waterfall principle, but I thought it gave the idea of you first generating, you get a source of capital, and then you use it to feed other passive income generating, which we didn't really focus on because it's more related to investing, and so we can talk about it another time. But that machine, once it's set up, once it runs, it really can get results pretty quickly. So yeah.